Good morning. Can you all hear me okay? Just somebody give me a thumbs up.
I can hear you, Dave, all the way from
Good
Hi.
France.
morning.
Hi, hi,
Hello.
hi.
It's Tony here. Can hear you too, Dave.
Bienvenidos a todos. Right on. I think Gregory is on his way over, I would assume. Welcome, Per. Per invited you up in case you want to join us up on stage. Just a reminder, you have to be on your mobile phone. Great. Well, today we're gonna dig into biodiversity credits. There's been, quite a fair amount of movement, Regen Network development, along with our partners around the world in this space, and looking forward to digging in with Gregory here in just a moment. And it looks like and pardon me, Carapia, is that, will you say
Yeah,
hello and make
I'm
sure
fine. My name is Esther. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay, good.
Can you hear me? Yeah?
Yes, you can hear you just fine. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. And Sarah, where are you right now? I know you're, I think, in another part of the world.
Yeah, myself and Tony, and also Will Gardner, who are all on the chat here today. We are at a beautiful place called Chateau de Fay in France. So all three of us just spent a couple hours designing some basic ideas for some credits for a tree nursery happening here. So the network is growing, and we're all here together in person today.
Very cool. And give us a quick update on what's moving over there.
Yeah, while we wait for Gregory, a wonderful set of partners are coalescing around this particular place and community as a potential location for a tree nursery for a French nonprofit that is trying to establish a network of tree nurseries across France in order to grow trees for farmers' hedgerows. So we've been working to support that organization and this location and thinking through how that could arise in the world and what all the different relationships could mean and all the different science data could mean and the impact could look like. So the three of us have been here in support of that conversation, and I'm excited to see them get their plan together for the tree nursery here at Chateau de Fay, and also the series and network of tree nurseries that will arise across all of France, hopefully.
Lovely. Awesome. Well, great. It looks like Gregory joined us. Gregory, welcome. How are you? How is spring on the East Coast?
Spring might be a little premature.
Sorry, I've got a Western bias or a West Coast bias here. My bad.
It's mud season here. So yeah, I mean, the last 3 days, it snowed about an inch a day and then melted over the course of the rest of the day. So it's blustery, breezy, snow squally, quite lovely. I actually like this time of year quite a bit.
Awesome. Well, good. Well, Pear's joined us. Esther's here. Tony's here, and pardon me, Vilmalani is also here. If I say your name, pardon me, my mix up there.
You can call her Lana.
Lana, bienvenidos, welcome. All right, Gregory, you want to set up the conversation and help guide us here?
Yeah. Well, I'm super grateful for this amazing group of friends hopping on to share a little bit of story, and we're going to be talking about the group of us. We're all together in the Ecuadorian Amazon. Visiting a community called Charamensa, which is the community that has launched these Jaguar biocultural credits in partnership with a group of allies, which includes Regen Network and Stokeness Futures, Fundación Pachamama, Pachamama Alliance, Amazon Sacred Headwaters, and others. So I thought it would be really great to just kind of have a little bit of a go around to share some of our experiences having the privilege and opportunity to go and sit with our friends in Achuar territory and learn a little bit about their vision and share about why each of us is excited about this pilot and this pilot in kind of financing the protection of standing forest and regeneration and protection of culture. Yeah, that's the context. And I'm just going to I think I'll just pass the virtual talking stick. I think maybe to start, just having everybody go around, share your name, and maybe a little bit about your relationship to this, and any thoughts and excitement. And I'll just pass the virtual talking stick to my right, imagining we're all in a circle here, and that would be Per. So Per, welcome up, and thanks so much for joining us.
Lovely to be with you guys. I don't know how long you want me to keep chatting, but this thing started for me a little bit more than 4 years ago, when I was with a group joining the lower Pastaza. It's an area of the Ecuador where there's Ecuadorian Amazon, where there are no roads. The forest is intact, biodiversity is amazing. However, when I was there, the boats had started coming down the Pastaza River from a road that was just being built by the end of 2019 to pretty far up, like 5-6 hours with a canoe and a solid engine above Charamensa. And the people in Charamensa were all in turmoil and conflict and sad as we got up 4 a.m. in the morning to drink tea with them at the Vayusa tea ceremony. And they were discussing how this trade of balsa wood now going past them and around them and logging along the river to transport it up to where the road had just arrived, and then being trucked over to the Andes to the Pacific, and then sold at a much higher price. So they were feeling confused, conflicted, and ripped off. And there were tears and anger in that early morning conversation. I knew about the idea about the situation before I came, and I was deeply touched by the anguish and the anger and this feeling that the modernity of which I'm part of was kind of pursuing us, and I could easily see how the logging industry would demolish that beautiful area if we didn't do something. So that was the start 4 years ago.
Fantastic. Thanks, Per. And maybe just one little bit more. I'd love to hear, before we pass it on, maybe to Tony after you, just a little bit about the kind of like what happened after that, because I think that was a catalyzing moment for you, but also for the community. And part of the story that I was being told and really got me excited was, the actions that the community took to sort of solidify their own life plan de vida, and all, which I know was not easy for them. And there was conflict with neighbors who wanted to do logging, but sort of like making a commitment to future generations in that moment, and then starting to call in allies and starting to work on what does it look like to actually create an economy that's not based on extraction.
Yeah, exactly. And in that process, I worked closely with the Fundación Pachamama. I spoke with them when I got into Quito, and I was flying up to San Francisco to give a keynote, and then on to Vancouver. So I met with Bill and Lynn Twist, and they totally supported the approach. So we could come back with a promise of financial support, given that they would start work on countering the logging and starting that work on their Plana de Vida to see how the alternative would look like. So from about 10, 11 months later, the first contract was signed. It didn't mention anything about Jaguar credits. It was all about giving them some support and funds in order to get their coalition together.
Great. Thanks, Per. So just continuing, I'm just kind of continuing to pass along to my right. I want to pass it over to you, Tony. Thanks so much for joining us. And take it away.
Thanks so much, Gregory. And Per, thank you so much as well for all of the work that you've been putting in to make this community a part of this story of what the world is currently facing. And I just want to take a step back for a moment and put this biodiversity credit, this Jaguar credit in context. when we were invited to go to the Amazon, I don't think any of us realized how transformative an experience it would be to understand the lives and the ways of being that the peoples of the Amazon had maintained for generations, thousands of years, in protecting this commons that they used themselves, but that was also a fundamental part of our global commons. And when Atossa showed us that visual, and hopefully we can share it in the comments below, of the atmospheric rivers that the Amazon generates that feed the rainfall and the flow of climate around the rest of the world, it really struck home how these friends, these family now on the front lines, are protecting something that we all depend on as humanity. And they and many other frontline protectors around the world are struggling not just against capital that is being put forwards for, in many cases, the same narratives of sustainability, the regenerative narratives that are being proposed around renewable energy result in mining that is actively destroying the Amazon. And these friends and family are on the front lines of this juxtaposition that our system as a whole right now is actually destroying that thing that we rely upon, even in pursuing the same narrative of sustainable transition. And so I think for me, part of the beauty of this particular credit is that it's seeking to look beyond the current system of carbon credits and the current system of capital and finance that is flowing into creating some version of a transition out of the destruction that we're currently facing. And yet, because it goes beyond carbon credits, because it actually goes to the community in question that is on the front line and seeks to ask them what they need, what are they doing, how do they relate to the forest and the jaguar as ancestors, and really giving people like Nunkwe the leading role in gathering the people and the wisdom of the community to really do what they've been doing for generations and really not seek to impose overly some top-down financial mechanism. I think that's the real beauty of this credit. And the story that I want to present is related to this idea of these systems that are overlaid over everything that we do. And it was told by Uyunka Domingo Perez, the elder who invited us in. He's been on the front lines of helping to bring together the many different communities and nations of the Amazon sacred headwaters for many years now. And with ASHA, the Amazon Sacred Headwaters Alliance of 30 nations of Peruvian, Ecuadorian tribes that he now leads as president of this indigenous-led organization, he's presenting Sharamentsa, his own village, as an example of what might happen, what could happen if the outside world comes in support of local communities and really enables them to resist in the ways that they know how and protect in the ways that they know how. And I just want to say it's such an honor to be a part of this effort to gather global allies to support these frontline guardians of the forest. And I think this credit is a first step towards how we can all support this kind of sovereign, local, cultural integrity based and cultural well-being and physical well-being based system that really centers the people who are doing the protecting on the front lines.
Beautiful. Thank you, Tony. Really lovely share. Now passing it over to Esther. Thanks for joining us, Esther.
Hello, thank you, Gregory, for inviting me and to share my experience. Just to say, a few words about me, my background is in sustainability, public policy, and technology, and I entered the blockchain space in 2018. I've been in and out of that space because I, coming from a sustainability background, I felt it was very not very regenerative. So I came back for good in 2021, and I've been working in different projects in the refi space, and that's it's relevant to how I went to Ecuador and to the Amazon. Yeah, I was a bit disillusioned, I must say, and cynical about the whole, refi space not making good the promise. I had seen a lot of hyperbolic narratives and claims which didn't stand, which were refi washing, and so behaviors which were not very regenerative, and lack of on the ground expertise, lack of knowledge of target communities and who were we working for and doing all this regeneration for. So that was a bit the background and the backdrop to me joining this trip. I had come to this trip by serendipity because I met Domingo Uyuncar last summer at an event. And I struck a friendship with him. I started to become more curious about indigenous issues and the Amazon region, which was an area I wasn't familiar with. And Domingo led me to pair. And also by serendipity, I was approached by the Inter-American Development Bank, the lab department of the bank, the innovation side of the bank, who asked me to work on a report, on a discussion report, discovery paper on the Amazon and regenerative finance. So everything seemed to align for me to go on this trip and have this transformative experience that I had. But I got there with that feeling of that I needed to see real impact, which I hadn't necessarily seen before in the 2 years and a bit that I had been in the refi space. So it was a very intense and full of a stimuli experience, because you go to a place you've never been before, you don't really know what you're going to be doing, you're part of a field trip. So from an environmental, from a cultural, from a humane standpoint, it was all very, very intense, but also very healing, very inspirational, and very invigorating. Yeah, so that was really, that was an eye-opening experience and a way for me to reconcile myself with the refi space. What I saw was a project which was having tangible impacts and benefits for both the territory, the village, Almensa, and also in terms of community, because as Per alluded to before, this community came from a very troubled recent past with the balsa wood crisis. So there had been a lot of conflict within the community, within families, between those who had or were forced to sell the wood and those who wanted to stay loyal to their culture and to their stewardship role. Yeah. So I could see that this project, this Jaguar Credit Pilot, had brought a renewed sense of cohesion within the community, also trust in external agents, because indigenous peoples have had many bad experiences with NGOs, with philanthropic organizations. So I think that is also part of the rebuilding process to build that trust, and also a sense of pride in themselves, self-worth, because as Tony mentioned, Almensa is becoming a a leading community within the actual nation. So this pilot is going to be replicated in other communities, and it's going to be them leading that scaling through their training, through training in their own language to their brother different communities within their actual nation, but also within other nations under the umbrella of the Sacred Headwaters Foundation. So I think that was very tangible to see how empowered they felt, and that they have they have a say and control over their destiny. Yeah. So and also something which was very energizing for me was to see the commitment, the personal commitment, the dedication, the emotional involvement of all the members of the team. Yeah. So both the indigenous coordinated team and also Per, Gregory, Joel, and all the people who are helping drive this pilot forward on the ground. So that was also very heartwarming for me to see. So I'm going to leave it here, Gregory. So,
Awesome. Thank you so much, Esther. That's really, really.
Thank you.
Yeah, really great. And Lana, passing it over to you, and then after you're done sharing your thoughts, I think we can go sort of to the next stage of the conversation and talk a little bit more in detail about what the pilot is, really, after folks have gotten to hear a little bit about each of our backgrounds and what we experience. So Lana, over to you.
Well, hi, everyone. So my name is a little bit unusual, so you can all call me Lana. It's a bit friendlier. My background is actually within supply chain. So what I'm trying to do is to try to learn as much as possible about sustainability so that I can integrate it within my work and also my personal life, of course. And I got involved, or I got the opportunity to go to Ecuador and the rainforest and learn about the Ashura people through what I call the ripple effect of the work from Perespen. Because I go into a course with him in a university here in Norway, and he's the teacher. And the course is about green growth. And so he spoke about the work that he's doing there. And I thought that I couldn't pass on that opportunity and go and learn and actually feel on my body what it means supply chains in a way, and see the nature and have that connection again with nature and people. And I mean, I've been traveling around, so I've seen, and I'm always in the nature and interested in cultures, but the whole setup, being there with the team, with the group that we were, and doing the reflections. And so it was a lot deeper, that connection and understanding the challenges that they are facing. So for me, it became somehow even more personal. There is the personal side in terms of, the paradox that, of seeing how the Achora people live and what they believe in and their traditions, and in the challenges that they face, with lack of opportunity, lack of health. And then meeting how we live here with the, overconsumption, having all these many things at home to deal with, and having all these boundaries between, all the individuals. And it's so difficult sometimes to cross that wall, to reach into deep into depth, connection with people. And so it was just a very interesting and very rich setup that we went there. And we talk about transformative, and I can see that already. Just been 3 weeks since we are back, and I can already see how it feels being back at work and working with with my work with supply chain. I can already see, how we operate, how that makes me feel, and how much I want to engage to try to make a contribution. But also I feel the impact on how I interact with other people and talking about this experience. And especially in terms of becoming even more conscious about how we consume, how we're living. I think those are important questions to talk about. So it's in a more simple day-to-day level, but I think that we need to see a lot of change in that, and being in that environment and seeing the nature, it felt like the whole situation, the whole crisis that we're in, it's not just a climate issue, it's a humanistic issue, right? And looking at the nature, looking at the K factory and seeing how huge it is, and the feelings around the tree and the impact and the symbiosis around it, it just shows and proves that it is so much bigger than us, right? So we all ought to go beyond what we fear, all the the insecurities that we have, what we believe we can or cannot do. So we all need to kind of let that aside and try to do a contribution. And no contribution is that small, but I think that we need to challenge ourselves to do the best we can. So yeah, so it's very inspirational trip, and it's I really appreciate having the opportunity to be here again. And Gregory, thanks for organizing this, because I don't want to let that opportunity or that experience die at that trip. So I'm looking for ways to how to carry on with that work, and how can I contribute. So and it's a process. It takes time to process the whole experience. So it's nice to have some friends along that can support in that way, and then figure out what I can do. All right. So that's
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Lana. That's lovely. And yeah, well, so now I think I want to invite us to sort of take a step back and um, maybe talk a little bit more broadly about this, like what this pilot is and how it fits in the larger arc of conservation finance, emerging market mechanisms for protection of biodiversity. I think I'll spend just a couple minutes sort of framing out my thinking about this. And then I'm especially interested, Per, in getting some of your thoughts specifically about kind of like what it might mean for an individual to be nature positive and some of the calculations you've done there. And Esther, I also want to make sure to pass the mic over to you to give us your thoughts around, I guess, kind of like what you've been learning as you analyze the larger competitive and landscape around this intersection of like nature and technology and markets. So I'll take a crack first, and then I'll pass it to you, Per, and then to you, Esther. And Esther, do you mind mute? Thank you. Perfect. Just was getting a little feedback. So broadly speaking, biodiversity credits, in quotes, is an idea that has emerged, I think, really just over the last 3 years or so, and it's been picking up a lot of steam since the biodiversity COP in Montreal, in which a lot of countries, all of them except for the US, and many corporations, many of the world's biggest corporations, Fortune 5, Fortune 500 companies, signed on to a nature positive pledge, which to coordinate economic actors to achieve a recuperation of biodiversity levels from pre-industrial levels, and the massive fifth grade extinction event that's underway now, to try to turn that trend around and recuperate the levels of biodiversity through a mix of what's being called nature uplift and conservation. So essentially stabilizing and regenerating biodiversity, with the understanding that the world economy and society really depends on the health of a vibrant and biodiverse biosphere. So thus this concept of uh, biodiversity crediting, which isn't in this case crediting as an offset, like you destroy biodiversity over here and you try to protect an equivalent amount of biodiversity over there, but instead is actually crediting our ability to make positive contributions towards a common kind of planetary goal that large nation states and corporations buy into in order to create a financial mechanism. And be able to guide that through market mechanisms. So that's like the broader, that's like, I guess biodiversity crediting 101 and the concept behind it. Now, over the last few years, there's been lots of experiments and talking. There haven't actually been that many live pilots. I think there's only a couple. This is one of the first. And it's certainly one of the first that is, although there are a couple of other good examples, that's really placing indigenous stewardship at the center of the process. Kind of a side note here, the more than 80% of the remaining biodiversity in the world is being stewarded by indigenous peoples, and they're only 5% of the population and total land mass. So sort of territorial governance. So we can see that sort of that level of stewardship is quite powerful. And for those of you who are in the blockchain space, in some way, you could think of this as a retroactive public goods funding process or something like that, in which we're acknowledging that the entire world is dependent on this public good of biodiversity that's been stewarded by generations. Now we're trying to figure out, how do we reflect that value, which previously has been unlegible and therefore creates all of this tension and challenge where biodiversity is being eroded and degraded, for instance, by illegal logging, and how do we dissolve that tension so that livelihood of ancestral stewards, of indigenous stewards, can be uplifted as they continue their cultural practices that preserve the forests that we're all depending on. So that's kind of just a broad overview of where biodiversity credit markets exist. I'm not going to go too much into the demand drivers. I will say that I feel like we've had really great luck and lots of great turnout in buying this first generation of biodiversity credits, the Jaguar biocultural credit, which is available. Should make sure to link that if people would like to go and make a purchase. It's very welcome. That's basically protecting standing forests in the Amazon. So with that kind of overview and just nod to the live pilot that's underway, I want to pass it over to you, Per, so that you can talk a little bit about the sort of like back of the envelope calculations that you were doing about what it might mean to be a nature positive individual.
Sure, Greg. So normally I work as a professor at Norwegian Business School, working with sustainable corporate strategies and leadership development. So that's my main focus. However, I have also a philosophy and eco-psychology background, and I've been working also with the Global Footprint Network, Mattis Wackernagel, and those guys who do the calculations of overshoot day and move the date type of thing. So what does it mean to be nature positive as a human, not just a corporations? Let's leave the corporates out for now, or even let's say biodiversity positive for a year of your life. So I was asked that question, and like, how many Jaguar credits should I buy, and if I want to be nature positive? And then I started thinking about that, triggered by an excellent question from Missy Laren, chairwoman of the Earth Law Center. And so I kind of painted this picture to her that one way to be a nature positive human is to have a positive ecological footprint per year. And as popularized by Global Footprint Network, you can go to their calculator and then you get an answer in the number of planets used if everybody was living like me. But the real number underlying the ecological footprint is something called global hectares, which is a counting unit for the biocapacity per year from photosynthesis. So 1 global hectare means 1 average global hectare of biocapacity as measured by an average photosynthesis. So the Charamensa biocultural Jaguar credits are issued at 7 credits per hectare. This comes from the methodology that I learned through Regen and ERA, the Ecosystem Regenerate Associates in Brazil. And the price is about $1 per credit. So if we follow this logic, then you or any other rich world citizen would need 6 times 7 credits, 6 from having a typical 6 global hectares of biocapacity per year for a lifestyle, and then 7 credits per hectare. And that gets you to 42 credits, or about $40 to get to a nature neutral point of view. So by doing that, these 42 credits will fund indigenous people to secure and safeguard about 7 hectares or 70,000 square meters of intact rainforest. And this will then, through the project and on the blockchain, be, so to speak, proved with quarterly reports and documentation. 7 hectares of intact nature is then roughly about the same biocapacity that your lifestyle requires to be, if you will, sustainable or nature neutral. However, ecologist E.O. Wilson is the founder of biophilia concept. He's also proposed the idea of half Earth. Half Earth means that humanity should use not 100% of the Earth's biocapacity, but only 50%, leaving the other half for the rest of nature. So, the Earth's biocapacity is about 12 billion global hectares, according to Global Footprint Network, and that means about half of it, 6 billion hectares, should be for nature. Thus, if I buy, like say, double the credits, 42 times 2, 84 credits, then I secure at least 7 hectares for my consumption and another 7 hectares for the rest of nature. So if I pay $84 or even 100, I'm clearly somehow on the safe side, helping the world move toward the vision of half Earth for nature. In a way, that's a kind of responsible action for my own consumption and a similar biocapacity for the rest of nature. However, I think we would abuse or kind of use not in a right relationship to the indigenous people if I also didn't work on reducing my own footprint at the same time. So just buying the credits and then increasing my footprint would feel and possibly be morally not right relation. So that's why I think we should work on being conscious of our annual ecological footprint, reduce that maybe by 10% per year or more, and at the same time continue with about that double to be truly nature positive as a person at this time of where society is at. Does that make sense, Greg, or not?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I really appreciated the first time I heard that from you. It kind of felt super clear, just the core concepts of sort of the global hectare and the understanding of the kind of global carrying capacity, photosynthetic capacity, and sort of the general equation at that allows us to kind of have a thought. How are we balancing our impacts, and how can then we contribute in a way that makes it legible economically and creates space economically for stewardship of these amazing biodiverse places, which, as Tony was mentioning, the role of the Amazon in cooling the planet through the hydrological pumping, the role of the Amazon as a reservoir for biodiversity is incredibly important. So, I mean, I think maybe I'll mention a couple things just that feel relevant to me and why I've put a lot of my energy and time kind of above and beyond just sort of my role at Regen Network, but just as a personal human who really cares about this. I came to realize the key role of the Amazon, this forest, in the pumping of water up into the atmosphere out of the sort of hydronic pumping action, hydronic pumping action of the trees, pushing water up into the atmosphere, both cools the atmosphere, but also it is increasingly being shown to be of radical importance to sort of our global climatological system and weather patterns. For instance, we're starting to see the Panama Canal dry up. That is costing billions of dollars of economic losses as fewer and fewer ships can cross the Panama Isthmus through the canal because there's a lack of water. scientists are saying that that lack of water can actually be traced to deforestation in the Amazon. And as we make these complex linkages visible, we start to understand that indigenous people stewarding their ancestral landscape in a continuous way actually directly impacts the cost of our lifestyles in Europe and North America, for instance. And so as we make that cost legible and as we choose to pay for the services that are being provided, many different services, but some that are very practical and tangible, we start to rebalance things in a way that feels very healthy. And so I think oftentimes people ask, where is this just a do good thing? Is there actually a mechanism that can make this, as if it's not enough that there's all of this intrinsic and relational value being generated? Is there some other driver that could connect with kind of like left brain, spreadsheet brain, degen, speculative interest? And, I think in this case, just to be clear, because of the sensitivity of working with indigenous people and because of the values and desires that have been expressed through the process, this is clearly not a speculative opportunity to buy these credits. This is very clearly an opportunity to build an alliance and a relationship with a specific place, a specific group of people to support their continued stewardship and production of this value that we all feel is incredibly important. However, the more that I think about it and the more that I see other people thinking about it, the more clear it is that there's kind of this building almost gold rush mentality around, in quotes, natural capital and these ecological assets more largely in the social construction of value, the memes around how the core importance of these types of activities to all of life, and therefore the need that we have to represent them on a balance sheet somewhere, on a ledger somewhere, is starting to attract an enormous amount of attention even from large banks like the Inter-American Development Bank. So that's where I want to pass it back over to Esther to just talk a little bit about kind of the industry writ large and how you're seeing kind of the demand emerge and, the competitive landscape around that demand for biodiversity credits and maybe natural capital assets writ large.
Yeah, thank you, Gregory. Just to clarify that I'm still in the midst of my analysis for the report, because even though I started back in, I think it was November last year, the focus, I think, the IDB has been undergoing changes. They just had their assembly 2 weeks ago in order to crystallize their strategy for the next 7 years. So, that's why the focus of my report has shifted. So it was going to be much broader. And I was more interested, before moving on to the technology and the market side of things, I was more interested in understanding the problems, understanding the region, understanding the indigenous communities' worldview, because that's what I'm gleaning from my research, that there is a lack of on-the-ground expertise. There is a lot of technology solutionism, a romantic vision of the Amazon, but not necessarily an understanding on the ground. There are many refi startups which are working to solve problems on the Amazon, but they haven't been there. They don't know the target communities, the end users. They don't really understand the problem they are trying to address and tackle. So that's why these kind of field trips we went to are extremely important to bring awareness and to really understand the difficulties that these indigenous peoples are going through, which again, the Amazon is not a monolithic block. So there are 9 countries, and I don't know how many indigenous communities, over 3,000. So even within the Achuar Nation, there is so much diversity. So they're very, sovereign about their territories, about their priorities. So they all have their own, plan de vida, life plan, and regulations and priorities. So I would say that I'm only now coming with conclusions, and with a lot of humility, because it is it's uncharted waters. REFA itself is a very nascent space which hasn't been put to the test, and there is no reliable data, enough track record in order to draw conclusions. This Jaguar pilot, credit pilot, is itself very novel, very pioneering experience. There is no benchmark examples, pilots to draw best practices from. So it's learning as we go, and I think that's very important. Working with indigenous communities that, in order to build this trust, because of these bad experiences they've had with project developers in the carbon market, to work with them on a yearly basis and to adjust and pivot as necessary, to help them grow their own capacities and become familiar with the technology, because as we know, technology has its challenges in these territories. There is no very limited connectivity. They haven't had, they're not exposed to technology as we are. ReFi blockchain-based projects are complex, and there has to be that period of capacity building and understanding of how this technology can help them. And through my research, what I've seen is that most pilots or technology projects that have failed are those who haven't had the communities into account. They haven't actually gone to the territory and have a dialogue, a respectful peer-to-peer, equal-to-equal dialogue. So I am completing the report. I will be completing the report next month, hopefully, and it will be presented end of May. And I'm happy to come back and present the conclusions then. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Esther. Maybe I'll ask the same question of you, Per. Just kind of, and Esther, if you don't mind muting, that'd be great. Thank you. Just this question that I'm rolling around in my mind is just kind of, I guess, and feel free not to answer it as well, but this question of, is there a way to link this type of deeply relational, intrinsic, uplifting, slow, careful, thoughtful process that we've all been entering into with a great deal of approach and courtship and permission and care? Is there a way to link that to transactional market forces? And I mean, that's what's underlying or motivating my question. But my first question is really, what are the market forces that are potentially driving demand? And then maybe what are your thoughts about how do we link something with so much care and slowness to something that's so fast and transactional?
Yeah, this is of course the big tricky questions, and still I think there is, and as you know, we've been approaching this through brand stories as a first step. So we already sold some Jaguar credits to a tequila company with a Jaguar brand. That is a spirits company. That's the first B Corp certified spirits company, and they are growing agave for their tequila in an area where there used to be jaguars, but these have been extinguished in that area. This is southern Mexico, and the idea is that they would like to pay Jaguar credits for each bottle of Jaguar tequila they sell as a way to contribute to regenerating the Jaguar population and strengthening the Jaguar population while they use the same brand for their marketing. Similar with the Jaguar Range Rover company that are selling Jaguar cars. If you want to exploit the Jaguar image to sell more in the marketplace, I think there is a, shall we say, benefit to the brand as well as a moral argument that you should also support the real Jaguars, not just the car Jaguars on the road. Particularly, I would like to see that would be applied for electric Jaguar cars, so the I-Pace, for instance. In that way, we can weave together some of the narratives from the marketplace with some of the narratives and the traditions of the indigenous people, where it's not extractive, but contributive to their efforts on upkeeping their long-standing traditions with the Jaguar in a respectful, ancestral way. Then I would see, as we hopefully scale this, it could also be companies that are not just in the Jaguar brand, but also wanting to be moved towards nature positive companies. So can you go from having just a negative impact that you offset towards improving your impact and at the same time contributing to nature positive targets? This is where it may become more, shall we say, loose connections between the business strategy and the type of credits you're buying. However, if we would go further on the ecological footprint type of calculations, I could envision companies that would want to have a net positive ecological footprint do some of the same type of calculations that we did at a personal level. Finally, I would like to mention the opportunity for impact investors. So if you want to contribute to the scaling of this by giving some kind of loan, for instance, with let's say 7 to 10 year time horizon, and then when the fund connected to the Jaguar credits grows above a certain limit, let's say 2 or 3 times the principal, then it would make sense for that fund to start paying back to the impact investors. In that way, you could do direct investment in scaling the capacity for stewardship and regeneration. So I think it's possible, Gregory, to actually make those connections. However, as also the Shara Mensa community said, we want to meet these people. We should go into a contract before they've been here. They've talked to us, and also we would like to taste the tequila. So that's what the first preliminary feedback from Shara Mensa entailed.
Yeah, can I just pick up off that for a moment? Because I think that's such an interesting story of the relationship that the people of Shara Mensa are seeking to build. That idea that it's very hard to have an idea of whether somebody is going to steward in a sense, a very sacred relationship that the Achuar Shara Mensa people have with the Jaguar. Are they going to steward it well? And part of that, I think, comes from this invitation that they've been giving us, and you and I and many others on this space have had the privilege of being welcomed in by them and actually building that relationship. And I think this is one of the things that I feel is, in answer to your invitation, Gregory, this idea of how we might bring this deeply relational, intrinsic, uplifting process into relationship with the transactional market forces of the world, is that through these kinds of eco credits, these biodiversity credits, we can represent not just a sort of financial transaction or some kind of ecological representation, but in many ways it is a invitation to relationship. And I think that's what our time with the people in Sherra sort of really embedded into us, is that they are hoping that through purchasing or coming into this kind of relationship through buying a credit, that it's the beginning of a journey. It's the beginning of a space of realigning, you know, our entire way of thinking about the world, you know, and in many ways, that's, I think, what we've been privileged to experience, is that, you know, our cognitive sort of modern world mindset, when in the presence of people who've been living very heart-centered, spirit-centered lives for many generations, becomes not necessarily the dominant worldview that we want to bring to bear on all of these systems, but it actually helps us to realign our minds, our bodies, and our spirits as part of what it then might look like to create a deeply relational, intrinsically uplifting economy. You know, as part of a credit system that is an invitation to a journey that can be relational, can be sacred even, you know, through. And I think there are these aspects of the media that can be shared, and the actual connections with real people that can be invited into, but then also these invitations to these journeys to actually visit and be a part of seeing and relating to these people as family. And I think that's really something that, when we look towards the potential future of what both blockchain and ecological awareness tied to an evaluation and resource allocation mechanism that represents an evolved version of finance. And this is this idea of regenerative finance. And when we think about regenerative finance patterns, can they also involve these relational elements? Can they be premised upon some additional layer of knowledge and information about your particular contributions in a particular community that might then be actually recognized when you go somewhere else, and thereby you have access to discounted goods, or you have access to the kinds of welcome and invitation and opportunities that a family member might have. And I think this is this evolved version of a future that ties together law and computer science and economics and business as part of a holistic living systems analysis and function that brings us closer to each other and brings us closer to life as a whole and supports that. And I think that's why I'm in such awe of Per and others who are trying to work within the system to actually realign it and sort of like almost carve a new keel for a ship that can take us into these realms of kinship and fellowship and all of these other potential underlying values of a new economy that we might craft together.
Thank you, Tony. And I can't think of a better place to leave it. We're kind of edging up to the top of the hour here. I want to be respectful of the time of our guests and of the audience. We try to keep the Regenerati News Hour to just that, an hour. This is a very rich, dynamic, fruitful conversation. I see folks in the audience requesting get up. I apologize that we need to keep the time short this time, but we do this every couple of weeks, bi-weekly. So join us again, and I think also, if there's appetite, we can continue to host dialogues and conversations about this really important topic. So thank you, everybody.
Can I just mention that I left the calcs in the tweet streams? I would love to have comments on people, how they think that calculation looks to them. So with that, yes. Thanks for inviting me, Gregory, and a pleasure again to be with you guys. And Tony, for your also wise comments. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao.
Everyone. Ciao.
Thanks, everyone.